This episode of Death by Bunjie is a look at my crossbow rig and my gear for Spring Gobbler. Now, I've never shot a spring gobbler with a crossbow. I've only shot one spring gobbler in my whole life, and was with a shotgun right down here in the woods over the hill behind me. You can check out that in another video here on YouTube. But I've kind of committed over the last few years to hunt only with a crossbow, almost exclusively. Now, I still hunt ducks or geese if I ever go hunting for those. I'll use a shotgun for that. Small game, I use 22s, and for woodchucks I shoot with a 270 because I just want to get rid of those. So there's lots of reasons I still use firearms. I'm still a big fan of firearms, but I like hunting deer with a crossbow, and I want to shoot a spring gobbler with a crossbow. That's my focus, and the only way to make that happen is to hunt all the time for spring gobbler with a crossbow. That's the only way it's going to happen. So I want to go over my rig here and show you what I use in terms of the crossbow and the other gear that goes along with it when I hunt spring gobbler. You'll notice from that other video that there's no guarantees even if you're using a shotgun with spring gobbler. I had a shotgun jam up on me in that other video, had to reload some of the shells in order to get it to go off, and finally did kill that gobbler. So I was kind of lucky there. The other thing about the crossbow is the effective range of this. Really, I think this thing's accurate out to 40 yards in my experience. I don't like taking shots beyond 30 yards with it, but that's pretty much the effective range for a shotgun on a spring gobbler as well. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, if I were out with my shotgun, I'd be looking at a 30-yard shot probably, maybe a 40-yard shot anyway. But on that note, one key difference is going to be the range. Now, if that gobbler's at 30 yards, it's going to be a different shot for me through my scope than it would be if that gobbler were at 20 yards. So a rangefinder is key. Once you set up in spring gobbler, just like you do for deer in the fall, you're going to make sure that you go through with your rangefinder, you find the distances so that you can get an accurate shot on those spring gobblers. Accuracy is everything with crossbow hunting. It is never more true than with spring gobblers. Spring gobblers have a very small vital area, not like a deer with a big set of lungs. This is a small area of vitals. Before I go out for spring gobbler, I always spend a little time online looking at different charts and different diagrams of turkey vitals to go see what those spring gobblers have for vital areas. That's what I'm going to be aiming at in the woods for spring gobblers. Now, as far as the crossbow setup is concerned, I take Bunjie here. There's nothing new or exciting or interesting about the crossbow setup in and of itself. One thing I will note is that you're going to want a place to mount your GoPro if you can, because if you're going to want to capture some footage, a GoPro in spring gobbler is going to be very useful, especially if you are not using a blind. If you're using a blind, you can get away with a tripod and a camera perhaps. But if you're not using a blind and you're seated in the woods in a ghillie suit or what have you, just sitting there in camouflage, that GoPro is going to be indispensable. I always get a question about what broadheads do I use. Broadheads are a big topic for crossbow hunters. I use the same broadhead for spring gobbler that I would use for deer. I don't see a reason to change. Now, one of the reasons I do that is because, as I've said before, the best broadhead for your crossbow is the broadhead that is the most accurate. In my case, these X-Act broadheads from Excalibur work perfectly with the Excalibur crossbow. They are what the manufacturer recommends, and so I stick with that. I don't see any reason to deviate from what the manufacturer recommends. This has more than enough cutting diameter to do damage to a spring gobbler with a proper shot, and because it is accurate on my crossbow, I know that I can get a proper shot if I am presented with that opportunity. So I will use the X-Act broadhead. Plus, if I were to switch to a different broadhead, you got a few other problems. If it's a different weight or a different broadhead, it might not fly the same on the crossbow, and it may require me to sight in differently. All I have to do here is make sure that this is still sighted in properly, make sure the string hasn't stretched any significant amount. Go shoot it a few times, it should be dead on, and I should be all set. The other problem with broadheads is, are they legal? My reading of the Pennsylvania regulations is very strict about what kind of broadheads can be used. Some broadheads are illegal in Pennsylvania. Some broadheads are probably illegal where you hunt. So you're going to want to check into that as well. Some broadheads are designed to take a headshot on a turkey. I don't see any reason to take a headshot on a turkey. Every time I've been in the presence of a turkey or seen them on the game cameras, their heads never stop moving. When it comes to archery equipment, when it comes to crossbows, I don't take shots on moving targets. That's just a bad idea. It's a recipe for disaster, even on a big animal like a deer. So I can just imagine on a smaller target like a spring gobbler, that potential for inaccuracy is magnified all that much more. So I stick with nice, safe shots on the body. They move their bodies all, they never stop moving. The turkeys don't, in my experience. But at least with a body shot, I've got a bigger target and it's a little bit more of a stable shot than the headshot. So those broadheads for the headshots, I don't even look at that stuff. I have no experience with them. I'm not even sure how they would fly out of here. They might interfere with the stirrup or something like that. To avoid that, I just stick with the same broadhead that the manufacturer recommends for whitetail deer. I see no reason to change. It's an expandable broadhead. A fixed broadhead is going to work great for spring gobblers too. Now, I don't get out and hunt for spring gobbler as much as I would like. I really enjoy hunting for spring gobbler. There's nothing more exciting to me than being out in the woods on a nice spring morning and having a conversation with a bird that's going back and forth. It's happened to me several times, and every time it happens, I feel so blessed. It is just a fantastic experience. Something that everybody should experience, I think. But I don't really get out as much. My focus is always whitetail deer. This is the time of year where I'm going to be working on the food plots. Frost seeding the clover, getting the lime out, getting the fertilizer out, pruning the apple trees, finishing up that process, and protecting the apple trees for the summer by increasing the sizes of the cages or doing all that work. I'll be doing a video about that here soon too. So there's a lot going on this time of year. You know all about what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Plus the fawns, as we get deep into the spring gobbler season, the fawns start to drop. So once you've got fawns on the ground, I don't want to be pushing them off into the hands of coyotes or anything like that. The other reason I don't hunt for spring gobbler an awful lot is because I have mineral sights out for deer. Now, under Pennsylvania law, we can't bait. I don't think turkeys are all that attracted to mineral sites. I do have trail camera pictures of them going to the mineral sites, but I don't see why they would use a mineral site the same way deer would. But it is considered bait under Pennsylvania's regulations. So for that reason, I don't hunt anywhere near my mineral sites. I want to make that clear. And I think under Pennsylvania law, I think that would be illegal. I don't do that. I do hunt for spring gobbler, however, on my sister's place nearby here. And I do hunt on the state game lands every year. It's a good opportunity for me to get out there and stretch my legs on the state game lands at least once or twice a year and see what's going on up there as well. So even though I have a lot of pictures of turkeys here and gobblers here, I don't hunt here for those reasons. I do try to get out 2 or 3 times a year at least for spring gobbler. Now I can get up in the morning and go hunt for spring gobbler before work. That's pretty cool. It's because it's so early. You can get up really early, come back, take a shower, and go to work. So I can still hunt even without taking a day off. Which brings me to another piece of gear and something I wanted to talk about as far as turkey hunting is concerned. A few people have asked me about whether I use a strap to carry my crossbow. I do not. I do not use a strap. The reason I don't use a strap is because I found it to be completely convenient and comfortable to carry the crossbow just over my shoulder. I throw it over my shoulder, walk around with it. I haven't had any problems with that in the past. I can carry it on my left shoulder. The quiver that way is extended off to my left. And if I put it on my right shoulder, I can carry it on its side, flat against me, with the stock flat against me. And I don't seem to have any problems with that. I never feel like I'm bumping the scope. Don't feel like I'm stressing the arrows too much. Seems to work pretty good. I've hunted all over my sister's place, walked there. I've walked for miles at a time over the course of a morning on the state game lands that way. And I hunted in Arizona once for javelina with the crossbow, carrying that miles through the desert, carrying the crossbow that way, and I didn't have any problem with it. I just throw that out there. I don't know that it will work for everybody. Just a little tip, maybe you would find it useful. You don't necessarily have to use a strap to carry your crossbow. Now, for me, one of the ways I like to hunt spring gobbler is using a blind. The one time I did shoot a spring gobbler, I shot it out of a blind. In my experience, turkeys have no problem going near a pop-up blind. It doesn't bother them at all. That way you are completely concealed. Your movement is concealed. It's legal under Pennsylvania law. I did that video here recently about interesting laws, and blinds are one of those areas that Pennsylvania looks at very strictly. So that's a legal way to hunt here. It's a very convenient way to hunt. You can set those blinds up, like on my sister's place, I can set those blinds up in advance so that I can just go to them that morning and don't have to feel like I have to set them up on the spot. On the state game lands, I can carry a blind all wrapped up in its little pocket, carry it up there, set it up, pop it up, set it up, and hunt that way if I choose to do so. There are plenty of options with that. Pop-up blinds are perfect. Gonna need a chair with a pop-up blind. How are you gonna sit in it? Here on this place, I always have these wooden benches that I use. On my sister's place, I could use that as well. On the state game lands, I carry a folding chair if I'm going to hunt that way. Or another way to walk around on the state game lands, another way to hunt, is to use a ghillie suit. Now, the ghillie suit, I carry that in a nice camouflage bucket that I have. And that bucket, after I put the suit on, I take the suit out, put that suit on, I can sit on that bucket, so I have a built-in seat automatically, or I can sit on the ground with it. It doesn't matter. But the bucket is a useful tool to carry around. I can carry gear in it instead of using a backpack, or once I get there, I can use that as a seat even if I'm using a pop-up blind. So consider getting one of those buckets. That's actually a pretty useful tool. The other thing you're going to want to consider having on hand for spring gobbler, if you head into the woods with your crossbow or really with any other weapon, is going to be some decoys. Decoys are particularly useful, though, for crossbow hunters because not only do they focus the gobbler's attention over to where the decoys are, but they also will pull the gobbler there to position that gobbler so you might be able to get a shot. If you're hunting without a blind, you won't have to move as far because the gobbler will be out in front of you going toward those decoys. You can set it up that way ahead of time so you've got better chances to knowing where that gobbler is going to be. The last thing you're going to want to make sure you have when you're in the woods spring gobbler hunting is an orange hat. I mentioned this before. I just carry an orange knit cap with me. Wear that orange hat so that wherever you go, people can see you while you're moving. Don't worry about it. You are not going to sneak up on a spring gobbler anyway. Those birds are out there in the woods. They are completely alert. They are listening. They are looking all the time. They pick up on just about every bit of movement. That's why they never stop moving their heads. They can pick up little insects on the ground. They certainly can see a guy like me walking through the woods. So they're not going to be fooled by you or me going through the woods. Don't worry about that. That isn't the issue. The issue is wearing that orange prevents you from getting shot accidentally. So it's only going to be a couple more weeks before Bunjie and I get to go out on the road for some spring gobbler hunting. I'll come out here, I'll hang Bunjie up on the hook here that was given to me by Casey Davis, a YouTube subscriber here on Death by Bunjie. Check out that video if you haven't seen it. But I'll hang Bunjie up as I get my boots on, get all dressed and ready to go. Take him off the hook, head up to my sister's, do some hunting, and we'll go from there. I can't wait. Last thing we've got to do here is sight this bad boy in, go through and make sure the wax is up to date, lube the rail real good. We should be good to go. Have you had any success with your crossbow spring gobbler hunting, or do you just not use a crossbow, or do you want to use a crossbow for spring gobbler hunting? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you subscribe here on Death by Bunjie just in case I get a spring gobbler. Eventually it's going to happen. Eventually it's going to be awesome. So make sure you subscribe so you can see that video when it happens. Check out our Facebook page for updates there as well. And until next time, all hail Bunjie! Second state is number one in my book.